with Tuesdays with Terry. Oh, it's so fun and exciting. I got to come up with an actual name for this thing that I can remember, that I can stick, I can use repeatedly. I think it's being on the 10 spot Tuesdays. I think that's what we're going to go with and we're going to keep. Now, the other key to keeping is like, keep on keeping on, so to speak. So we'll see what that looks like as we continue to move through, into 2023. We've got, week one, the first week of January. We're definitely on here doing this, but, we'll see what happens after that. It's going to be fun. So last week, we talked all about the power of focus. And if you missed last week, that video is living on my website at trybeing.com. It's one of the top blog posts. By the time you see this, though, it'll probably be the second or third blog post, because this will be on top of that, because that's how we're going to do this for a little bit. So I'm excited about that. So focus was topic one. Today, we're going to talk about how to raise your awareness quotient. And what I love about this idea, aside from the fact that I think I made it up, right? I started talking about an AQ back in 2008. But more to the point is that it's both internal awareness, like the things you need to do to be aligned with you and who you're trying to be and what you're about. And then the external awareness, making sure that other people are aware of you, what you do, who you serve, why they care. So it's got some really good tidbits of information. Actually, this whole thing, right? Last week's, this week's, the next 2 weeks, they're all from a presentation I do called The Face of Success. And I think I shared this last week, and I'll probably share it every week that we talk about it. It was basically a love letter to me, right? I wrote a presentation when I was really down in the dumps. We won't talk about how down, but I was in the dumps and I needed to get myself out. And one of the challenges I was facing was not having enough success. So I sat down, went straight introspective, thought about all the things I've studied, I've learned, I've researched, I've watched, I've listened to, I've read, and what do they have in common? And what was I missing from those things? And for me, it was these 4 items. Focus, still missing focus, if I'm being totally honest. Awareness, pretty good here. Communications, yeah, not bad. We'll talk about communications next Tuesday at 10 a.m., so December 27th. And then execution. So execution being, kind of the mother of everything. If you're not executing, what the heck are you doing? So let's get into this little chat and talk a little bit about awareness, because I think it's important. And they mentioned there's internal awareness and there's external. So we're going to dive into some of the internal things. And I think what matters here is, what do you know about you? What do you know about what do you want from this life? Supposedly, we only have one life to live. So if that's true, are you going for it with somewhat reckless abandon? Are you going after the things you want? And I want to be really clear, because if you're like me, you probably want a lot of different things. And if you want a lot of different things, that kind of goes back to that focus. It's really hard to amass a lot of different things simultaneously. They talk about the idea that we're all multitaskers, and then smart people say, BS, no one can multitask at all, which is like, whoa, what do you mean I can't multitask? I'm doing 6 things, but are you doing any of them well? Are you getting 100% effort into any of them? And technically speaking, our brain does not do work on multiple things at one time. It moves fast and it seems like we can shift gears, but there's this whole study on attention shifting that says that, like, let's say I'm sitting here writing a book, which I'm doing, and someone walks through that door and says, and for me to get back into the same state I was when I was writing that sentence came in, it could take 5, 10, up to 20 minutes because that shifting attention thing is so important. That's why when you watch a movie like The Social Network, when they're talking about programmers writing code for software, they say, whoa, don't talk to him. He's locked in, right? He's locked in because if he were to look up from what he's doing, they know it's going to take him 20 minutes to get back into that same mental state. So that awareness, that internal awareness, and that focus is so stinking important. So, we're talking about internal awareness. We're talking about what do you want to achieve? And, we also need to look at what's our peak state of performance and how do we get into that? My friend Rod Hairston used to always talk about have a power move. What's you're about to do something big. Maybe you're about to take a stage and give a presentation or, be in front of the boardroom and give a same thing, a presentation, or you're about to go play a game or you're about to do something really important. And you've got to change your peak state. You've got to change your level of consciousness. You've got to raise it a little bit. So, what's your move for that? Mine was always, yeah, right. And just hitting that made me my energy shift. It made my vibration uplift. So you got to think about how do you get into that peak state. I can tell you what it's not, right? It's not resting, it's not being lazy or lounging around. It's movement, it's action, it's activity, it's going out and doing something. A lot of people run, a lot of people lift weights, a lot of people do yoga, a lot of people are intentionally mindful about what they put into their body. And all of those things can help feed our peak state. So that becomes a really important element here. Um, I look at life, and I've done a talk a handful of times called the 5 pillars of a life well lived. And I look at those 5 pillars as our mental health, right? And I don't mean like mental health in, are you depressed or not depressed? I mean, are we taking good care of our mind? Are we feeding it? Right? It needs to consume good, positive stuff. I just got done watching the TV show Peaky Blinders. I'm not sure that that was good, positive stuff. I enjoyed it, but I don't know that I would invest those 34 hours that way again. And I wrestled with that the whole time I was watching it for this very reason. So mental, physical. What are we doing to stay active, to stay physically fit and healthy? And they say that walking is some of the best exercise we can get. Just going for a quick 20-minute walk. Your dog will love it if you have one of those. I don't know if your cat will dig it as much, but just getting out and doing something every single day, especially if you can be outside. So you've got mental, you've got physical, you've got spiritual. How do you commune with whatever you believe is or isn't God? How are you accessing that higher plane of existence, that higher plane of consciousness? So there's that. You've got your emotional, or excuse me, not your emotional, but your relationship health. Are you maintaining the relationships with friends and family members and loved ones and business associates and people that you need to interact with? Are those fit? Are they well? Are you taking care and investing into those? And then that final piece is financial. Are you financially doing what you need to be doing? I will tell you that the 8 seconds in my life where all 5 of those were humming was the best 8 seconds ever, man. It was woo, things are good. So, got to make sure that you're taking care of those. One thing that I suggest is taking a look at what's called biorhythms or circadian rhythms. There's apps for it all over the place, and you can see how these 8 different areas ebb and flow throughout the course of the month. So these actually dictate how we feel, how we believe, how we behave. And so you're going to have different levels of energy across these different planes. So it's important to kind of get tapped into that a little bit. Um, and so I talked about the idea of know who you are all the time. In fact, I had a license plate that said N-O, WHOUR. Know who you are. So start understanding your personality type. Maybe you take a Myers-Briggs test. Maybe you go take a DISC assessment. Maybe you look at predictive index, whatever the case may be. Go start to figure that piece out because it's really, really important. And those assessments, a lot of them are for free and available. So check your personality type and get an idea of what you're really about. I think it's important. I also think that reading is fundamental, right? They say that leaders are readers. So it's important to say and to understand what you're reading. One book that I always recommend is The Four Agreements by a guy named Don Miguel Ruiz. Um, and I got pushback from somebody that was exceedingly spiritual saying, it's too light. And you're right, it is light, but it's supposed to be light. This is the intro class. This isn't the mastery class. Because if you're not doing some of these things initially, then you're probably not going to do some of the deeper work that's needed too. So the four agreements are: be impeccable with your word. 2, don't take things personally. 3, don't make assumptions. And number 4 is always do your best. I've got videos on this on my YouTube channel. So if you want to dig into that deeper, great. If you want to read the book, even better. Last time, I think someone took the recommendation and read the book. She actually wrote an entire presentation and delivered a TED talk on it. It wasn't a book report, but it was spurred from this book. So really, really powerful stuff. Um, it's important in your relationships and when you're trying to grow your business or grow yourself, is to do it with other people. And the best way to engage and interact with other people is to find common ground. It is the basis of all good relationships. And honestly, I wish it was more in our nature to do a better job of this, because I don't think we'd be having conversations about race or gender in the way we're having them now, because we'd realize that our common ground is human. I say all the time, I'm not interested in nationalism. I'm interested in humanism, because I know that together we achieve more. I've seen it, I've watched it, I've lived it, I've helped facilitate it, and it becomes a really important thing. And we do that by finding common ground. People sometimes wonder, well, why? Why do you think that? Why do you believe that? And my answer is this: I've gone deep enough inside of me to find you, right? I realize the level of connection that we have at a spiritual level, at a visceral level. Because once you go deep enough into you, you actually ascend into a different level of consciousness where everything exists all at once. They may call it source energy, and it's pretty flipping cool. Um, Best way to find common ground is to meet somebody where they are, ask questions, learn about them, and then figure out how you can relate to them. That's why the game is so fun. Of you find out someone's from Iowa, and you're like, oh, do you know John Smith? He's from Iowa. It's always hilarious, right? Um, so, good things to look at. The next thing, I want to switch gears a little bit, and I kind of did on that last talk about the finding common ground, is figure out what your brand is. What is your personal brand? What does it stand for? How are you known? Are you consistent with it? Do you own spot one in your network's mental Rolodex, right? When they hear an opportunity, are you the first person they think of? If you're not, you need to work on that. I was thinking about this in the shower today. I had this past week, a really good friend of mine asked me to join him and see if we wanted to do a podcast together. And I've known this guy for 15, 16 years. And I said, well, I mean, I could do another podcast. And he's like, you have a podcast? I've been doing a podcast for 8 years, right? We've got 200 episodes together. And so obviously, I'm not doing a good job of branding that particular podcast, because if I was, he'd know, and so that's an interesting thing. And that's not the first time someone was surprised to find out I have a podcast. Truth is, I've got 8 things going on at all times, so I can understand how something like that would get missed. Once you figure out what that personal brand is, you've got to come up with some messaging. And that messaging has to dot your intended audience right between the eyes. It's not enough to broadcast, to put information out. We have to narrowcast. That's a Charlieism. We have to lock in and put messaging together that speaks so directly to our desired audience that nobody else hears it. And that's okay. You know why? Because nobody else was going to hear it anyway. But the people you're trying to reach have to have it like kind of reach out, grab them by their shirt collar, and pull them in. Your messaging has to be for an audience of 1 or 5 or one specific group. Forget trying to be all things to all people. It doesn't work, right? People are like, oh, he must not be talking to me. So you've got to make sure that you're dotting people directly right here. So if I were to talk about what 3 things that you can do today to raise your awareness is 1, breathe. And I don't mean just take normal breaths throughout the day like you have to do to live. I mean, be intentional with your breath. Think about the things that matter. Think about the things I've talked to and breathe through them, right? They talk about the 4, 6, 8. Breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 6 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds, right? Breathe intentionally because breathing changes your state of consciousness. 2, be incredibly grateful. We live in an amazing time. I don't care what's going on in the world. I don't care what's going on with Twitter. I don't care what's going on in the Middle East or being shown on the news, right? Your world, the space between your ears and the people you interact with, I care about that. And those are the things that you should care about. The rest of it is noise. Focus on the signal and be grateful that you're here to be able to do that. And the last thing is clearly visualize the life you want to live, right? What does it look like? If you're a journaler, sit down, write it out, get the notebook out and just write down the things that are important to you. But we have to think about it from a detailed level and a high level abstract. We have to look at it from both perspectives because, quite frankly, we can't just keep focusing on the minutia, the little tiny details, because those details end up actually throwing us off course. We have to look at a high level direction, and we have to trust that the things that we're meant to do will show up clearly, and we'll know the next step we have to take consecutively to get to where we want to go. All right. My name's Terry Bean. I run a company called TryBean LLC. You can find that at TryBean, TryBean.com. You can find all kinds of interesting information about how to grow your business, how to grow yourself right there on the blog. You can also see some of the speaking I've done. I've got a cute little highlight reel up there now, which is kind of cool. It's a little long, but I like it anyway. You can learn about the coaching that I do and how I help my clients go from where they are to where they want to be. And if you're interested in any of that, there's all kinds of ways to reach out. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, which generally goes out every other week, usually on Wednesday around 10 a.m. So I like it. January 4th, we're doing a little event at Imagine Theater in Royal Oak. We're going to do 2, one at noon and one at 7. Got a handful of friends that are going to be bringing the goods around how to grow your business in 2023. So I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, December 27th, right here, 10 a.m., talking about communications. Have a wonderful day, a very Merry Christmas, a happy Hanukkah, and whatever Kwanzaa is and whatever other holidays are going on in this time. So whatever you do, do it the best for you. Be well.